mic test.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Happy Friday.
Yes. Next week is going to be a busy week for most of us. Whoever is planning on attending and presenting, doing demos. Looking forward to meeting all of you. So Manoj is going to be late. He's going to join 30 minutes later. So do we have Vikrant?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Vikrant. I think the plan was to present your slides, right? The perf data.
Yes, I was going to give a brief overview of what I'm presenting next week so that
Yeah,
the
we
rest
can
of
get started maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get started. So a couple of updates. I know we talked about 4 white papers. As you know that we essentially submitted the 4 white papers, and these white papers essentially include use cases, workloads, and then hardness tracking, and then the logical architecture, CMS logical architecture. All those white papers have been submitted, cleaned up. We got the feedback from Subproject lead, and we incorporated that feedback. So is the feedback from OCP Foundation folks. At this point, we are essentially waiting for the grace period for them to be published. I believe they wait for 2 weeks or so to essentially make them, public. What it means is you can actually see those white papers in the OCP website. So that's where we are on the white papers. I think we pretty much closed on all the logistics for the demos, CMS, OCP CMS station demos. And I hope all of you are actually, have whoever is owning the demos, they actually shipped the equipment and getting ready for the demos next week. I don't know any other opens on that side. So those, at least things are going well on the demo side. So those were the 2 opens, and probably after the OCP summit, we'll start planning on working for the next batch of specs and white papers, at least lay some foundation work, this year so that we can start that work early next year and maybe submit few of them for the first half and then remaining for the second half. I think in general, we are taking the goal of 5 more white papers, 5 to 10, anywhere between 5 to 10 next year, white papers plus specs. So looking forward to actually, the contributions from all of you.
So Reddy, I did notice some formatting issues and like typos in the papers. Is there an opportunity to clean those up, or somebody else takes care of it?
Oh, did you see the typos? Okay, I thought I would. When we went through the
I mean, in my
spell
own
check.
section, I saw the font was different, so that stands out. Looks weird.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe we should just clean it up and upload it back.
Okay, I mean, happy to correct it. I wasn't sure what the process is.
Yeah. Let's correct it and upload it. If it's, yeah, I mean, we don't want typos for sure. Right. Okay. Are there any questions are there any specific opens for the next week? Okay. All right. Thank you. Vikrant, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Reddy. I think I was on mute.
Go
I
ahead,
had
Nara.
So when are we if we are hand carrying the the demo setup, when are we supposed to? When will we get entry access?
That should be Monday, right? So can you send a note to Kelly? I mean, you should be able to get the access on Monday.
Monday? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, they'll be setting up
email?
Monday morning. You do have to be on an early access list to get in, though. So
right.
talk to Kelly, make sure you're on the list.
Yeah, I think Nara, you are on the early access list, right?
Yeah, I'm on the list. I didn't know when, if we get like Tuesday morning or Monday.
It should be Monday.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Vikrant.
All right. Okay, so I just wanted to give a brief overview of what I'm planning to present next Wednesday. So I won't go through the entire presentation as such, but wanted to focus more on the results, and I threw in one more slide that has additional benchmark, which I will not present during the OCP meeting next week. So I skipped through the agenda and sort of the background, which I will keep for the next week. I wanted to focus more on the benchmark, the results, and the setup. So I got access to a Intel Sapphire Rapids system with dual sockets and a and 4 CXL devices, and I am showing the topology here. So I had access to this from one of the partners here, and it had 2 terabytes of memory split between sort of 6 NUMA regions and 4 zero-core NUMA regions that were basically the CXL devices, and then a standard NUMA 0 for socket 0, which is hanging off DDR, and then socket 1, which has 512 DDR base memory. Okay, so I ran spec CPU, and I'll talk more about the actual benchmark during the summit next week. Basically, I focused on one spec CPU 2017 component, which is called Omnet app, and that does sort of network socket read writes, or it's supposed to emulate that transaction, and that is a highly memory bound component within the spec CPU suite. And as you can see in the graph on the bottom left, typically you would see around 50% of your CPU cycle stalled, waiting for memory to come back, or memory data to come back from memory, and that is when you are running it on local DDR memory. So when I ran this particular benchmark pinned to the CXL devices, you notice that CPU stall cycle goes up to 80%, because now the CXL device is of course a little slower relative to the DDR memory, and the runtime goes up 3 times. So if you look at the x-axis on the extreme right of the axis, you'll see that the Omnet app run for the DDR finished in like 2700 seconds. At that same run takes 6400 seconds. So this is not surprising, or the results were not unexpected. I was actually quite optimistic and impressed that we are only 57% lower on the spec CPU score, which was like I would have expected. If it was 2x or 3x, that would have been worse. So I'm glad that we are within 100%. And after talking to few folks on the group, as well as sharing the results internally, I came to know that we are working on improving the latency of the CXL. So that should definitely help the spec CPU score. So don't double click on the score so much. This is what the spec CPU emits. But the point to take away is here that we have concrete quantitative data to work off a baseline. And as we improve that 0.6 to say, and get it closer to say 1.1, I think that is going to be very promising, and definitely something that then can be baked into your TCO equation.
Did you happen to keep the bandwidth the same?
The bandwidth the same? No. This was purely based on the capacity of like using 512 gigabytes in both cases, and not focusing on bandwidth.
That one important parameter, as you know, is bandwidth. So if we're comparing local memory to CXL memory, it is at least fair that we do it with the same bandwidth.
Yep.
So in other words, if you have to, you might have to limit where the memory is locally, or if you can, add more CXL devices to create the same bandwidth.
Correct. So we went through that math, and again, this is purely based from a customer standpoint. Like our customer, who is our compute team, they would expect us to figure out the bandwidth underneath. So we came in fully knowing that this has 8 channels operating at 4800, and this is basically operating at around 25 gigabits per channel, and we have 2 of these. So yep, fully expected that.
Vikrant, on the latency on your slide, you are showing it, right? So this is like, even though you say average last level cache data read miss latency, this is like MLC, where you are read to consume from the CPU core is 134 nanosecond, you're saying, for local memory, and for CXL is 389. Is that how I should interpret it?
So this is not MLC. This is from the Intel telemetry collector while we are running the spec CPU benchmark. This is the latency that we got.
That makes sense because it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
a little higher on the Intel. So I was just trying to figure out, do you have the idle latency also? Because that gives
I have
an
the
idea.
MLC numbers. Yes, I have the MLC numbers, not on the slide because that's not part of the presentation, but yes, I do have the MLC. I think Nara also presented it last time, if I'm not mistaken.
So the reason I'm asking is this because CXL devices are still very new when we get it. So are you seeing a latency of 180, 190 nanosecond, idle latency, 200, 250? Which ballpark are you at?
I can pull that out if you want. I
That's
can
okay. We can try to do it
But
later,
yes,
but
this
that
is not
gives an idea.
this is not MLC. This is purely from the Intel profiler, top-down profiler. This is one of the metrics, Linux perf counters.
Yeah, this is another indication. It's likely that bandwidth was choked because, as you know, latency goes way up, hockey stick why if you don't have enough bandwidth. So if we expect idle latency of about 180 to 100 nanoseconds and your loaded latency is close to 300, that basically says we didn't have enough bandwidth.
Yep.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Usually, like idle latency, what we have seen is 2x that of direct attached memory.
Okay, so SPR is somewhere in the ballpark of 100. So you were seeing 200 nanosecond idle latency.
Yeah, something like that. Usually it is 2x, and RAND and even loaded latency is like 2.1 uniform access. Random access is slightly higher.
Okay, makes sense.
Yep. And I think that I fully double clicking on that bandwidth comment. I think I fully comprehend that CXL will have lower bandwidth, but when I am presenting this as a TCO solution to my stakeholders, like they are going to look at 512 GB here and 512 GB here, and assume that all the performance kinks below will be taken care of, because they are going to be buying per gigabyte basis. So
CXL doesn't have lower bandwidth. It's just in the system, how much we use is important. If you have one memory channel versus 8 memory channels on the DDR side, and only 1x8 or 1x16 link on the CXL side, that's not a fair comparison. You can imagine 1x8 CXL link to be equivalent bandwidth throughput as one DDR5 channel.
Yeah.
So if your local memory has 8 DDR channels, for it to be fair, you also need to have 8 CXL by 8 devices.
Yeah, we could try that. I think that's a good idea. Maybe we spread these 256 GB devices across like 64 GB and 8 devices of these, or we put 256 GB DDR here. So, and 2 channels. That's the other way to do
it. The media here is in the buffer, is it DDR4 or 5?
5.
5.
Yeah, we could do that as a follow.
So, Vikrant, do you know if you are limited by the PCIe? What is the bottleneck for the CXL memory bandwidth? Is it the PCIe bandwidth or the DDR5 bandwidth?
That's a good question. I actually saw the bandwidth was around 60% of one DDR channel. I don't know whether it's a function of latency here. I would think that's the case. I don't see the PCI Gen 5 bandwidth being an issue here. And someone else correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, if you can add the aggregate bandwidth for in the next slide that you actually see on the system DRAM versus the CXL memory buffer, that will help.
Yeah, I can add that.
I mean,
Michael,
you'll have that data anyway. Right?
Yes. Yes. Curious about the different type of benchmark, because spec int or spec FP have very different performance curves. So I'm wondering if you have a breakdown of the specific benchmark that was run, right? Because there's so many different ones that you can run. Because spec int is more latency sensitive versus the spec FP, which is more bandwidth
That's right.
bound. Yeah.
That's right.
So I use this particular component within the suite, which has typically this CPU stall profile. 50% backend, and around 15-20% front end, 25% front end.
So
Yeah, very good data. Yeah.
Reading this chart, I may have missed early comment. You said it looked promising, and this CXL memory looks worse.
No, I'm half glass full kind of comment. Yeah, 57 is like, I feel within reach if we have again solved the latency issues, or as Siamak said, if we have more devices in a pooled solution. I think I was just trying to allude to that. It's not impossible to see this come closer.
So, but the use case, Vikrant, you are looking for is not really point everything to local memory or point everything to CXL type 3, right? So it's going to be essentially tiered solution. The data for that would be interesting, right?
Not even tiered. It's just going to be just a regular NUMA domain that we will use for container allocation.
Okay, so you're essentially going to, use one versus the other, not
correct, for bursting or flexing the memory capacity. So then I ran again, like this is the other cache bound component, which has very high IPC and very low DRAM usage. And this again, I was glad to see the hypothesis or my speculation that we should not see any impact to scores was completely true. We got the same spec CPU score per core with between local and CXL. And as you can see now, the stall cycles, because it's not memory bound, there was very little interaction with either CXL or the local memory, and that essentially results in the scores that you see here. So this was very, again, when you look at it holistically, our services are either cache bound or a container are cache bound, or they use a lot of DRAM. And when you think of a holistic solution, this is very promising that you could have some affinity or do some sort of container allocations based on the performance profile of the container.
Vikrant, you mentioned it, but just remind me. So when you run these like X264 or the previous one, you're running as many instances as the number of cores to saturate the bus?
Correct.
Yeah, 48 copies.
So,
okay, yeah. Thank you.
This is an example, yeah.
Yeah.
This is all, again, if somebody asked during the presentation next week. So this is all O3 flags. I haven't tweaked any of the spec CPU components, and that could be another thing to consider is the optimization flags relative to CXL versus local DDR, if that is an option for us to really make proper use of CXL from a code configuration optimization standpoint.
Makes sense, yeah.
So no OFAST, no hooks that we would use for spec CPU to run faster in a local DDR environment.
Yeah, and I've seen JE-malloc also helps in spec int. So yeah, I didn't see that. So I understand you're using just the default.
Very vanilla flags, yeah. So JE-malloc helps both. CXL would help both CXL and local DDR equally.
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then sort of they are offsetting each other.
True.
It's almost like 3 times in the previous one, right? Memory bound omnet type latency.
Yeah, this is when there's a cache miss. Yeah, Omnet app relies a lot on. Yeah, this was coming back very slowly.
Yeah, so this is like loaded latency.
Fully
right,
loaded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. This is loaded. So, I mean, from a usability perspective, where for loaded latency, is that an issue?
Yeah.
That's
for container workloads.
That's a good question. I think this latency, I mean, the score is low. So we have done some correlation of our scores to service throughput, and we do see that the requests that we are able to serve do drop, especially for some of our Java workloads or mapping services. This score is very, very well correlated to the throughput of the map services. So yes, in this state, 57 is not usable. But again, this is a early device. I've been told that the latency should come down to improve by 25% in the upcoming versions.
So yeah, QPS will go down, right? If you use CXL, query per second kind of. matrix.
Sorry, say that again, Durgesh.
Vikrant, so if we use QPS, just building on what Reddy was asking, query per second for microservices, if you have, that will go down with CXL memory.
Exactly, yes. But if not, it will not go down if, so we have two types of services. One is cache bound, and again, if it's a cache bound service, it doesn't care about local and CXL at the back on the memory side. So this is where the
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
TCO play comes in.
Yeah.
There's a question, Ravi.
Yeah, what is the unloaded latency of the CXL type 3 here, which you're using? Because most of the things are dependent on that now.
Yeah, I should put that here maybe. Nara, you said you had that, right? 200 and 100?
Sorry, can you please repeat? Oh, the CXL IDA MLC numbers?
The idle latency, yeah.
Yeah. It is yeah, it's not the absolute numbers, but usually what we see is like 2x what you see on the direct attached. I mean, like with respect to the setup, at least what we have, that may not be apples to apples with what you have.
Is it close to one hop NUMA on the same platform, or is it?
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
close, slightly higher than that, but pretty close.
Okay.
I think like we have presentation with the demo on the MLC numbers as well in the OCP, so we can go over that.
Vikrant, one more question on the previous. So did you actually do the CPU to the local NUMA pinning, or you just, is there any NUMA control settings on this?
Yes, it was all, I think spec CPU by default, Reddy
Oh,
just,
it does, okay.
yeah. So this, okay. When I talk about local, it always pins to these two, and then
local socket and local NUMA.
And then for CXL, it was interleaved between 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 afterwards.
I see.
Do you plan to share any of this data next week?
Yeah, this is actually my presentation. So this is what I'm.
Well,
actually,
that's why I'm a little worried.
Okay.
Because I'm sorry to say this, but in a public forum like this, if we present data, the audience is looking for data, and they're going to focus very much on whatever you're presenting. If the presentation is somewhat not complete or skewed in a particular way, the audience might pick up some things that it takes a long time for us to go kind of redo. So if whatever you say, you might say, this is my data, but you say all of these caveats, for example, on bandwidth, on latency, on the number of things you picked or whatever that is. But because the general understanding I have, at least, perhaps others have similar, in some cases, having more bandwidth that CXL provides, because you can have multiple devices plugged in fact helps. So if we're comparing local DDR to CXL memory, and we don't keep bandwidth constant, we get different results. And presenting that data, because people are really looking for numbers and data, they might get kind of confused.
Yeah, you may want to put disclaimers, because your local memory 1.4 score is heavily skewed, towards the fact that you have significant amount of bandwidth plus the lower latency. So it's kind of not comparing apples to apples.
Okay, yeah, I can throw the bandwidth.
Right. If you can just put those disclaimers right in the beginning, saying that, look, this is the initial part of the experiment. Here are the opens that we still need to close.
Or maybe you can normalize it based on bandwidth.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yes.
Yeah, if you can normalize, that's even better. But I don't know if that correlates very well. But yeah, it's your call.
It actually does. So as I said, the per channel bandwidth was 60% lower, or is 60% of the local is 30% higher. So I can try playing around with that bandwidth number a little bit.
But the score is more important, right? So yeah, sure, those are the secondary metrics, but in reality, it's the score that actually counts. My worry is 1.4 versus 0.6. There is a big gap. In reality, that may not be true.
That's what I'm saying. So if you normalize to the bandwidth allocated for the score for the run, that might just bring it at par. Like,
Yeah,
so
if you can normalize the score based on the bandwidth, that will help.
Yeah, so I'll try to do some math and make sure it doesn't come out.
I suspect it will definitely help, but it might be skewed the opposite way, which is also not true. I can kind of imagine you have eight units of bandwidth on the local DDR compared to CXL. I don't know what kind of CXL memory you use. More than likely is it by 8 connection. So by 8 CXL, it's equivalent to 1 DDR5 channel. So if you in fact normalize your score based on bandwidth, 1.4 divided by 8 is not fair to local memory. So you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So let me do this. I do have the bandwidth numbers from the Intel. So the good news I have, when I did the profiling, I also have the bandwidth numbers of the actual bandwidth usage during the run. So it's not like a theoretical all 8 channels. So maybe that might be the number to use for normalization.
Yeah, because I'm guessing this workload, I haven't seen the EMON data, but I'm guessing this workload is not really saturating all the channels and all the bandwidth. I doubt it.
No, it doesn't.
So the question is, what is the utilization that it is actually trying to consume? And then if the utilization is somewhat, not saturating all the bandwidth available on the host system,
So
then
maybe let me do that. I have the bandwidth number from EMON, which I can use to plug into this. Then that might be more apples to apples.
Sorry if it's a bit repeating.
It shows whether it is skewed or not, right? So the perf with local versus type 3, are they really comparable? Are they skewed? Just by looking at some of those bandwidth numbers.
Sorry if I'm a bit repeating Siamak notes, but so is there a summary slide, or what is the narrative for the presentation? Is it a recommendation? Is it a warning?
No, so this.
What do you think?
This presentation is just to advocate like the use of the benchmark. I'm going to submit this benchmark to the GitHub or the OCP or the CMS website, and then basically crowdsource, and we can run this template to figure out what the right metrics are. And I think this discussion is exactly that, hey, what are the right metrics for comparison? And looks like clearly bandwidth is input when we think about performance comparison. So that's the intent.
Well, I would suggest that, kind of in line with Iran and Siamak, it seems to me that the concern is, what are the conclusions that are going to be drawn by the audience? And I'm sure all of us on this call who have been looking at CXL very closely and thinking about this for a while, the first kind of phase gate we're trying to get past is it even usable? It is, the server didn't catch on fire. Spec CPU actually completed. That in itself is a bit of a success for those involved in the consortium and wanting to see, like, already believers in CXL memory and wanting to see it succeed. But if you're coming in cold, this is a pretty underwhelming result. It's not obvious that the conclusion that we're taking away is going to be the same from them. And so some sort of guidance in advance saying, if we saw a 0.3 or lower, as an example, or 30% lower, or sorry, 80% lower, some sort of metric or guideline, some sort of red line after which we've decided that there's no extent of CXL memory controller optimization that could salvage the performance of the system. Like that to me is what the takeaway from this presentation is. That's like, look at where we are this early on in ecosystem development. This is very promising. And so providing some sort of, as Zaran said, a narrative or some sort of guidance on the conclusion that we're hoping to, that people take away from this, I think that would be very helpful. Because if it's just numbers, then it's really you know, it's almost subjective. Do they think 50% is a red flag and they should walk away and never think about CXL memory, or should they pay attention to see things improve over the next 6 to 12 months? So that, I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well, you know, because they may not be familiar with this workload. So, you know, just looking at a data table can be construed in a lot of different ways. So my recommendation actually would be to have a chart, you know, maybe let's take a look at the CPU utilization along with the actual memory capacity. And then what are the metrics that are being used, you know, because if someone kind of takes us out of context, they will question all the things that we've been questioning on this call, you know, and even latency, idle latency versus loaded latency, and all these different ways to look at it. You know, I brought up also the spec int versus spec FP. So there's so many kind of ways people can attack it, right? So the more we can expose it, the more people can come away with a resounding or clarity on if this is good for my workload, right? Especially if you say this is pooled memory versus, you know, direct attach memory. And it's like, how far away is it, right? Are we talking about like an E3S device or something over a cable or something like that? So I don't know. It's not clear to me if I were to come in cold whether or not to use CXL.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I have one additional comment, Vikrant. It's I think that the presentation, the way you have right now, I think it's really comparing local DDR with CXL, right? And I think that there's a lot of comments from everyone already on how to better compare it. But another point that's really missing here is that CXL is additive to what's already there in DDR. So it's really additional performance, additional bandwidth that's available, additional capacity that's available to the server. And you know, so it really enables the additional workload that you see on the right. It's not the one or the other. It's in addition to the one in addition to the other, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Vikrant, you got the feedback. Do you have more slides?
Nope. So I did also. This is not presented. This is not going to be presented at the summit, but I also got the Java results. Again, this is I haven't called it out here, but 18% lower is actually pretty impressive. That when you ran the same Java operation on the CXL device, the max ops came pretty close to local memory, and this is definitely something that's usable.
What benchmark is this one? Java with what?
This
what
is spec
which
JBB.
Java. Oh, this is spec JBB. Okay.
So again, this is
just picking up on that real quick. So you mentioned you're going to upload your work to GitHub. So one of the things that we're doing is publicizing all the benchmarks that we do at Memverge, and I'm trying to get CXL bench off the ground. So conversation for another day, but I would hope that we could crowdsource a lot of benchmarks into a single repository that we can all use. So.
Yeah, that's a very good idea.
Is there a way to kind of maybe piggyback on LM Bench and open source that?
Yeah, I don't know what Manoj and Reddy, I think you had some guidelines on where the benchmarks should go, right? I was told to just provide them and put them on the OCP website or some local folder.
Yeah, I mean, these benchmarks, because we are talking under the umbrella of OCP related work, these guys, these benchmarks will go under OCP GitHub. So.
Vikrant, our experience, I can just share because we took latency sensitive, bandwidth sensitive, and capacity sensitive workloads, and it is not one stop that can solve all. By varying the ratios and bandwidth sensitive applications also see a benefit from CXL additions. So it's the configuration is very important in order to tune. we have three examples, three workloads which are sensitive to various parameters, and by tuning them, we were able to reach CXL giving better performance. So probably there should be a tuning parameter here, which might give you better results, I feel.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And do we know spec CPU when you say it is, what kind of pattern, workload pattern? It is 70-30, 50-50, or what kind of pattern it is sending out?
I can check. I have the CPU stall profile, but that doesn't tell me the memory transaction pattern.
Are you looking for read-write mix?
Yeah. What's the mix work? What is this?
What the workload read-write mix? Yeah, I mean that should have you should have that data actually. Vikrant, I mean if you collected and kept that data.
In Emon, in the perf. Okay,
yeah, you should have that. Yeah, read versus write. Yeah.
Because like CXL cannot saturate the other two edges where 100% read or 100% write. It will give best results only at 50-50. And if you're comparing local with CXL, the best comparison is only at 50-50 or 70-30.
Okay. All right, that's all I had.
So Vikrant, I suggest based on the feedback, right in the beginning, if you can set the stage saying that we are working on set of benchmarks, right, that essentially characterize the CXL benefits and, segue into spec 2017 why, right? And then essentially when you talk about the configuration and the test scenarios, indicate that that's not a complete list.
Yeah,
right.
I'll just put after this slide, I'll just put a sort of a slide that calls out the goal of the experiment and how this is not this is not fully tuned. Yeah, and just call out the disclaimers.
Yeah, this is the initial set of data, and then a very small set of configurations, and the plan is to expand this to broader set of configurations and match the capacity, match the bandwidth, and all those pieces. You can just allude to that right in the beginning. And kind of put a disclaimer saying that don't make any conclusions out of this data because this is failed in the beginning.
Yeah. No, I'll put a positive spin. In fact, I was, as I said, I was impressed that it's only 57% lower because, as I was told that the latency is going to be much better in the upcoming version. So maybe I'll just explicitly call that out. So that
if you can call that out, because the devices are actually, device vendors are optimizing the latency part too, right?
Correct.
So this is essentially the the early eval systems technically.
Yeah. I'll make a note of that. I think that will, and then remove the this looks a little weird when you think of 190%. Of course, people who know fully expect that, but maybe that shouldn't be taken misunderstood.
Yeah, but this is an excellent first step though, because we really need to get to a set of benchmarks with an ability for anybody to run those benchmarks, right? Run these experiments. I mean, folks who haven't actually read the white papers, the workload white paper does have, the set of, set does have this benchmark description and all that stuff, right? So.
Right. That's all I had. Yeah, glad I presented before this team so that the other audience does not get shocked or surprised either way.
Thanks, Vikrant.
I joined a little bit late, but I saw Emon. I'm like, oh, my eyes flashed up, and so to me, there's other statistics that would be interesting too. But maybe we can talk more about it at OCP, other than just the memory latency part. So maybe we can talk about it offline because I think it kind of, and I don't know if this came up the overall discussion already, but just how we choose to report other performance data in the future for other benchmarks.
Yeah. I mean, we can definitely talk about that. I don't know if you tuned into the beginning part of the discussion that Vikrant had. He's basically talking about spec 2017.
Yep, I saw that.
Those are benchmarks, right? Yeah. So he's leaning on those, those scores as a starting point, and then clicking down on the lower level metrics to kind of give clarity on what could be the potential bottlenecks.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, I kind of got that, and I just was looking But I just meant in terms of other things with respect to, you know, how much you can have missed latency, but if it's being handled because I might have multiple outstanding loads in progress, then I get a little bit of memory level parallelism and doesn't affect CPI as much, right? You know, stuff like that. So
right.
Maybe we could take that offline and talk about it in more detail, but maybe we could look at that as an eye towards what you need to report, you know, eventually. But yeah, sorry, I missed all that part. I heard 5 minutes of it, so I don't want to chime in too much or spend too much time on it, not knowing exactly what you talked about. But thanks. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Great feedback. Okay. Manoj, you just joined. I see you.
Yeah, sorry about being late today. Just couldn't avoid the clash, and I missed all the fun presentation from Vikrant. Then.
Yeah, it's recorded anyway.
I thought I'd learned from Nara and took away 50% of my slides, but that didn't help.
Okay,
That was good feedback.
I'm eagerly awaiting rerun of this video later in the evening.
Yeah, and I think numbers are tricky, right? Everyone has interpretation of numbers, so I'm glad I threw them out before the OCP presentation.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Vikrant. Manoj, do you have any opens? I covered the Experience Center demos and white papers in the beginning.
No, I had one thing which I'll send out an email ready that I think we didn't talk, but Experience Center has those 2 10 minutes lightning, sorry, what is it?
Lightning talks, yeah.
Lightning talks. So I have worked on those presentations. Only thing, since I have a clash, Nara will present them. Those are 2 slots with the same presentation being done twice. If anybody is willing and ready to help out, would love to get a help. This is going to be presentation in the expo hall. There are 2 slots. Content is ready, which is going to talk about what is CMS and what's happening in the Experience Center, what demos we are doing, and just basically redirecting traffic there to that. That's really the goal of the presentation. It's like a 10 minutes, 4 slides. So Nara has graciously accepted to help me out and present those. But if there are 2 of them, so if anybody is willing and bring the material to people, there's one presentation around I think 10 and another one around 11. I don't know if Nara is online right now.
Did Kelly send out the actual time? I didn't realize.
I see. The thing is, basically, this never had come as any kind of
oh, really?
Reminder. So, but it is there on the calendar. So I did
posted in the calendar. Okay, good.
It is posted in the calendar, but surprisingly, I never got any reminders. This is where, although we had talked about it, it had fallen sideways a little bit for me. But we have material. I'll send it. We'll send it out to everybody to look at it. But that's what will be presented. So if anybody wants to raise hand and do one of those 2, let me know and then we can do it. We can raise it right now. You can send me an email separately. I know Reddy and I, both of us have a clash that day for us to present.
Yeah.
Right, Reddy? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can, Nara, if you can post that in the OCP Global Summit, that will help. Folder in CMS.
Yeah. Is Nara here?
Nara is here, yeah. Unless he signed off.
Yeah, it looks like that because I don't see him. But in any case, we have the presentation. We'll post it by tomorrow because he still has to send it to the legal today. But there's nothing there because we will use it from existing material and then we just add the Experience Center map into it, and so there's not a concern about approval.
I see.
But we'll send it out. So we'll do that.
I guess.
Yeah, and what I by the way, since we have not received any reminder, I'm assuming we just take our laptop and do it on that day.
That's it. Yeah. I don't think there is any.
So we'll cover that there. So
sorry, Manoj, I heard my name, but I was attending someone at the door. Sorry.
Gotcha. So what we're talking about was basically Experience Center, the presentation that we are working on, that we talked about yesterday. We can send that deck when it is ready. We'll put it in the this CMS folder and send out the link to everybody. And I suggested also that since we have 2 slots, if somebody wants to raise hand, I'd take one and help you out. More than happy. We can definitely use help there. But otherwise, we all thank you for taking the responsibility of it. You have been volunteered essentially.
Thanks,
And thanks for doing
Nara.
that.
Yeah, thank you. I guess anyone wants to sign up for the other 10-minute lightning talk on Thursday?
The material will be ready. You just bring your base suit out there. So, okay. I don't want to push you. We'll do it. If anybody is ready and willing, Thursday around 11 o'clock slot, raise your hand and we'll have the deck ready as well as the laptop ready.
I can do that.
Sorry, who was that?
This is Vince Hache from Rambus. I'm happy to do that. This is the 19th at around 11 o'clock.
I think so. Maybe Nara, let's coordinate on that one.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Vincent.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Vincent. Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. That's all I had from my side, Reddy. And thanks for doing this. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. That's pretty much it for today. So maybe next week we may want to cancel it just because everyone is in the summit.
We should.
And then settle back week after next, fresh.
Definitely look forward to meeting everybody, as many people as we can on Wednesday. We start at, what is it, 8 o'clock already?
Sharp 8 o'clock.
So bright and early. Let's meet there. Let's have fun. It's a full day event and experience center. I'm quite excited. That people and OCP Foundation is also very excited. They look to this team as a strong success and really center of the things where the excitement is happening for OCP. So I'm absolutely looking forward to this.
Yes, and thank you, Manoj, for leading this. You've been I know you spent a lot of time on it. So,
John, appreciate that. I didn't realize you were there. Otherwise, I would have chosen my words even more carefully. I'm just saying. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, John, for your support.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys next week.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.